Hey guys, how are you? I hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing a movie review. This movie is an action thriller from South Korea, Korean language English subs, released in the year 2014, directed by Lee, and this film is called No Tears for the Dead. So No Tears for the Dead is about this hitman. He's been assigned a task by his boss to wipe out this target who is involved in a lot of criminal activities. So one day he's located at this nightclub, so the hitman goes in to take care of it, but what the hitman doesn't realise is that the target has brought along his young daughter. So when he kills all these criminals, he accidentally kills the young daughter as well. So this basically crushes the hitman. He's wrapped by guilt, he doesn't know what to do, he's contemplating the future, and he just can't get the image of this little girl out of his head. And to further complicate matters, his boss now tells him that he has to wipe out the wife of this target, who is the mother of the slain girl. So he doesn't want to do this. He sees this as an opportunity to try and redeem himself, and he wants to tell this woman the truth about the death of her daughter, because basically she just thinks that she was a target as well. So he wants to tell her the truth, but in order to do that he's going to go on the run because his boss has sent out hitmen to take care of him now. So not only does he have to protect his own life, but he also has to protect the life of the person that he's been assigned to kill in order to get that truth out, so he can get a little bit of redemption and a little bit of closure to the whole matter. So whether or not he can do that, that's something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on No Tears for the Dead. This director, Lee, is actually the same director of The Man from Nowhere. So I really like that film, and I think that The Man from Nowhere and No Tears for the Dead do share a similarity in that these movies humanise a demonised person. In the first film you've got this killer who was just a very brutal man, but when he's actually subjected to innocence, you can see a different side to him. And this movie is very similar in that, yeah, he accidentally kills an innocent young child, but that has really woken the good side out of this guy. And so these demonised people in these films are getting humanised to the point where you can't just spit on them, you can't just hate them. Initially you do hate them, but then you end up liking them because these are people. And so they're very three-dimensional characters, and there's nothing stereotypical about Lee films. I think this guy is a very good director in action, because these aren't your stereotypical action films. These aren't action films like Mad Max Fury Road, where it's all about the spectacle. These are movies that actually have solid storylines, and it's the storyline that plays the forefront, and then the action scenes and the action sort of treats are there for good measure. So in this story you've got, the theme of the story is guilt, and how guilt can crush somebody, and how somebody looking for redemption can do good things. And you've got the Man from Nowhere, where it was about friendship and loyalty, and how far someone will go for friendship. So they've got these very good themes intertwined with a very dark sort of story. And so this is what makes the film good, because when you don't see action taking place on the screen, you're actually still very interested, because the character's very good, the story is very good, and it winds up, it develops into something that you want to know more about. So it never gets boring, and that's the problem with a lot of action films. If you don't have non-stop action, you're going to get bored because the story's not there. And so Mad Max Fury Road especially, that was just non-stop action. You don't get a chance to be bored, and straight away you would associate that with an absolutely fantastic action film. I think Mad Max Fury Road is greatly overrated. I actually feel that The Man from Nowhere and No Tears for the Dead were much better films, because they've got a very solid story, and these people aren't caricatures. These people aren't cannon fodder that you just waiting to be killed. These are people that you can actually associate with. So that's what I really like about this director's work. I thought the acting in this film was superb. You've got the main character who at the start is this heartless man, but then he starts to open up. I thought the chemistry between himself and this target was very good. It doesn't go into melodrama, it doesn't go into any unnecessary love story side plots. It stays very far from each other, as in this killer, he doesn't kind of open up to her and she doesn't forgive him, and it's all well and good and they fall in love and they've got a battle together. It never gets to that point. They're still very disconnected, and you feel that this guy wants to tell her the truth but just doesn't have the opportunity, and you feel that this woman doesn't know exactly why this hitman is protecting her, but you feel that it's all going to unravel at the end, which ultimately is exactly what it does. And I thought the ending was very good, and it rounded up all the loose ends almost perfectly. So the soundtrack was very good. There are some melodramatic moments, but thankfully they're not overdone to the point where you think that it's insulting, and that it's not way over the top where you can just kind of disconnect yourself from the situation. There was moments in this film that were incredibly emotional. Some very, very sad moments, especially when this guy is basically thinking, and you can sense the guilt is just ripping him apart, and the way that this mother reacts to the death of her daughter was very sad as well. But it always stays into moderation. It never goes over over the top where you think that it's just trying to force feed everything to you. So that was good, and I thought the soundtrack was very good as well. So it is a fairly long film, but once again it doesn't outstay its welcome, which is something I always appreciate from South Korean action thrillers. Unfortunately, this movie is not quite as good as The Man from Nowhere for the simple fact, well actually there's two reasons. Number one, I thought it tried a little bit too much. There were a lot of characters who were thrown into the film, there are a lot of twists and turns, and you really have to stay on your game. So you're marvelling at all this great action, but if you're not concentrating as soon as the action finishes, you can get lost in the story. So I thought it tried to be a little bit too fancy for its own good, but having said that, it never derails the experience. And then number two, it doesn't stray too far away from what made The Man from Nowhere good, and I know that's a smart move. If you make a very good film and you're making another movie, it's not a bad thing to try and emulate what you did the first time, but in this movie I thought there's a very familiar formula in the way that this transpires. In the first film you've got this cold-hearted man who, once he gets with an innocent girl, he starts to transform into a good person, and that's exactly the same thing with No Tears for the Dead, is that this guy had done something horrible towards innocence, and that innocence has engulfed him and it's changing him as a person. And so initially you wouldn't associate this guy with being a good guy, but that's what happens, and that's exactly the same with The Man from Nowhere. So although this movie is different and it does have its good moments, you still feel that you're watching something very similar to The Man from Nowhere. I was constantly reminded of The Man from Nowhere while watching this movie, but I will say that it's much more violent than The Man from Nowhere, which is saying something because The Man from Nowhere is a very violent movie, but this movie does have some brutal violence, so fans of the more extreme kind of violence are going to like what you see in No Tears for the Dead. So it is a very good movie, not as good as The Man from Nowhere, but I'm still going to give it the same amount of stars because I just think they're very well executed stories and they intertwine with the action very, very well, and these are action films that I believe should be made more often. And I think it's a prime example of a filmmaker who is not lazy and who actually loves this genre and really is at top of his game. So overall, for No Tears for the Dead, going to give it 4 stars. Go out there and see it. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies and I'll see you later.